Like I said, we got two doctors in the house today, which is great.
Yeah.
So basically, we are continuing in sort of like a consistency in terms of the upper echelon.
Oh please! Oh please!
Now
it's too hot for that.
It's too hot.
I feel set up. And I'm wondering, how am I meant to meet up to that expectation?
Well. This is the thing. I think we are as great as we think we are, right?
I guess so.
And to me, I think the joy is seeing people who are doing well, or at least who are contributing to the wider community in Sheffield, especially that education space. I mean, like Donald is a retired educator and every great stuff. So for me, I'm always kind of in awe, because I'm in the presence of greatness.
He's a terrible flatterer.
Right?
That usually follows it with something he wants you to do. So be mindful there.
Yeah.
But Chuks, so let's Chuks introduce himself.
Chuks, yeah.
Right. So I'm actually listening to you. I was wondering how I could come up with something that could sound different from what you've just shared. And in all honesty, while I feel like it's great to always see people that seem to be doing stuff that are big and bold and, seem like stuff the society want to clap at, I also feel like some other people that are not necessarily doing the things that seemingly seem big, I feel like I always find them to matter a lot.
That's true.
Right. And in all honesty, from a place of like sincerity, because I realized that some of what we say here is not just going to be heard by people in the academic community. Like it's very vital for me to be able to share, what's my understanding and perception of those people are, because the truth is in the seemingly less attractive and less valuable in terms of societal standards. You learn a lot from people. You learn a lot from the experiences. Sometimes bad experiences, sometimes good experiences, and sometimes they sort of shape the convictions, the perceptions, ideologies that you yourself that seemingly seem successful, sort of take and sort of shaping your life to be in the best way it can be. Right. I know I have to sort of dull the room a bit. Right. But I'll just give a brief introduction about myself. So my name is Chuks. Right. I'm a Nigerian. Right. And speaking about my journey actually started from, my home country, Nigeria, where I sort of like, did my undergrad to, study medicine, undergrad. And just to cut all of the long story short, while, in Nigeria, I think I attended about 7 universities at several times in my lifetime. I had a very tumultuous journey in high school. I ended up not doing high school, right? So I went from junior school to being in the university, which is another story for another day. But, working as a doctor in Nigeria after graduation, I was sort of immersed in a community, in a space that sort of promoted industry, basically. So you technically had to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to seemingly be progressing, to seemingly be successful. And, I got swamped up with that. I was working as a doctor. I had picked up a lot of, digital skills. I was working in IT. I had a company as a communicator. I worked, in marketing. I also worked in arts. I used to teach in a school. I used to teach art in the school, which sounds really crazy,
It does.
Yeah, actually. And, for me, the journey was more of one where I, irrespective of how much I was doing while in my home country and all of the value I thought I was producing, because I felt I was really, giving out value to people there. There was a lot of like recognition of what I was doing. I still felt there was a need for me to be better, right? There's this sense of there's a whole lot more that you can sort of step into in terms of being able to sort of like offer more value, be a better version of yourself, and there was always that sense of pursuit. Unfortunately, my home country wasn't very best fit for me to be able to live out what I felt was an expression of my best, especially because I worked as a doctor, worked as a researcher, academic researcher in teaching hospital in my home country, and I did quite a number of research. And, looking at how research was done, I felt like it could be better, right? And, options started to come along the way. Where do you want to go, right? You're comfortable where you are. You're doing really well. You're probably top 10 in terms of socioeconomic class. Do you want to sort of leave that place and start all over again in a different country? And it sort of led to my pursuit for coming to the UK, right? And it's funny because, imagine coming up as 10%, top in your home country, and you move into a new country and you consider yourself 10% lowest, right? So that was like the journey for me coming to the UK. I had to come in to sort of do a postgrad program, and you pay a lot of money to sort of go to school in the UK as an international student. And my postgrad program was actually in research. I had a lot of experience in research in my home country. I was leading research, but I had to come to a country where I was considered a basic, like starting from like the least to sort of learn research, because it's difficult to just come into a community and just get in it. You have to sort of find yourself showing some level of value and sort of learning how things work in that community. And it was more of a pursuit of value. It was more of a pursuit of being able to get more out of my life, moving to the UK. And it's not been an easy journey. When we speak about this podcast, we speak about the fact that it speaks to mental health. For me, thinking about it, moving to the UK was a test of my mental health, right? Basically, I have moved in. It's been a couple of years, months, and it's been really good for me. It's been really good because it's been rocky, ups and downs. But I look at it and see that I'm able to achieve what the core vision for moving over was for me, which is being able to live more out of my life. I guess, as we continue to talk, I'll share a lot more.
What about you, Steph?
So it's like where to start. I guess, so my dad is from Nigeria.
Interesting.
And my mum is from St. Vincent in the Caribbean. But I was born in London, in Paddington. And I guess the best place to start, this is when I was coming to the end of secondary school. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? But at the same time, with the Nigerian father, I don't know if you've heard of Gina Yashare's joke that says there's only 3 things you can be as a Nigerian. Was it a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure?
It's interesting. That was the same thing with myself, actually.
Yes, of course, it's the same for all of us.
I was born into a family of 5 doctors. It's crazy to think about it.
So when I came to my dad and I said hairdressing, he was like, over my dead body, shouted that in the middle of parents' evening. Over my dead body. I said, Dad, it's a respectable profession. So that didn't fly. So I think, I tried to find something that I was like, Dad, I can't do 5, 7, however many years in a classroom sitting down, I can't do it. I need to do something where I'm with people. I need to do something where I'm connecting with people, but something that I also feel like I'm contributing to society. So nursing was kind of the happy medium. So I did my nursing course, really enjoyed it, but at the same time knew it wasn't for me. There were some experiences on the ward that I was just thinking, I'm not sure if I'll survive this environment. There was some kind of subtle but very loud racism.
And was that patients or colleagues?
Oh, come on.
Colleagues.
Come on.
Colleagues.
Come on.
Patients you can take, they're in their most vulnerable moment in their lives. They may be from a different environment.
Understanding of life.
Yes.
Yeah, but the colleagues.
And you're both, in a sense, because you both have a medical background.
Yeah.
And I asked what sounded to you, it seemed like a naive sort of question, patients or colleagues.
Yeah.
I only say that really because for many sort of black doctors, nurses back in the day, Caribbean nurses in particular, they used to always get that comment, which is, I don't want some nurse looking after me sort of thing.
But that you can almost, for me, I can only speak for myself, I could almost accept that, like, okay, silly person, having a bad day, whatever. But when it came to colleagues, the people that you needed to support you, the people that you needed to double check the drugs that you were given, that you'd need to back you up if something went wrong, and not having that support, that's detrimental to your career and to your life.
To your mental health, actually, I would add. right? Because you live with this constant, sense of anxiety,
Yes.
right? Of, am I getting it right?
Yeah.
I don't know the intention of this person towards me,
Yeah.
but it feels different. It feels weird, Yeah.
Yeah, because one thing I find about your journey is, because London, then there is Spain.
I'm getting to Spain. I'll get to Spain. Don't worry. I'll get to Spain. So I finished my nursing course and said, do you know what? It's not for me. Actually, I should probably mention there was like you have to do a dissertation at the end of it. And it was, I did a small piece of research. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm enjoying this because, for me, it's just talking to people. I can do that all day, all night. So I was like, that's lovely. Like a nice piece of qualitative research where you're doing interviews. So that was really nice. But then I finished my course. I was like, what do I want to do? I don't want to go to the wards. What do I do? So I moved to Spain to teach English. Yes, I had to. Yeah, but I was terrible at it. My grammar's horrible. So I was just sort of entertaining these students and they'd come out with no information.
How did your dad take to that then? You're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer,
I know,
and you're off to Spain to teach English and you're not that good at it.
I know. But, he's a supportive guy and I think he had faith I'd find my way in the end. But yeah, he had to be a bit patient and there were many phone calls of, what are you doing? So there is that additional pressure, I think. You can't just go off like, your white colleagues might do. But it was what I needed that circuit break, for my mental health. I came from, secondary school. So mine, you said your school was about 25% black. Mine was, I think, 0.01% black, and I was that 0.1. It was that white.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm kind of skipping around a bit, but I was very angry. I didn't know it at the time why I was angry. It was only years later when I had therapy, like in my 30s, and then it was like, oh, that's why I was angry. All of this was happening to me. Obviously, with my teenage brain, I couldn't quite process where those emotions were coming from. But, so I think there's something about, even if you're in a kind white space and people are being kind to you, there is that loneliness and that sense of they're not understanding me, and it's not even always necessarily the fault of the people that you're around, but you do need these black spaces for your mental health, for your mental well-being. It's only later in my life I've figured out that I need that. I can't explain it. I don't know what the studies are. I mean, there's studies on ethnic, density. So if you've got more black people living in one space, you feel better.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's so important for work, isn't it? I mean, if you spend such a long time at work anyway, just on the most basic thing, 8-10 hours a day at work, 5 days a week for 40 odd years. If you're in that place where it's you feel like it's just you, and there's not that, automatic understanding. You can feel. I mean, I always remember one time when I was at an event for head teachers and deputy head teachers, and it was a sort of conference, and the person who was sort of delivering it at the break, I wanted to ask them a question. There must have been about 100 people there. I was the only black person, and I asked the person the question, and then I walked into the lunch space. And all the tables were taken. Everyone was sat down, apart from one table left. And I sat on a table on my own. Fortunately, after about 5 minutes, the presenter came in, and actually there's no space anywhere else, came and sat next to me. But I was so visible. And it's that which really, I remember feeling this, I'm visible. They may not have been looking at me, but I felt visible.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And I think, so I finished my PhD at University of Sheffield 2019. And since that time, I've worked really hard to create spaces for us. So with two other colleagues, I started the, what was BAME, it's not BAME now, but the Staff Race Equality Network Mentoring Scheme. So that's us talking to each other, sharing knowledge, sharing networks, making sure that we have those kind of, I don't like the phrase safe spaces, but those spaces where we feel seen and heard, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And I started the Black Radical Reading and Action Group, BRAG.
A brag. And what's the radical bit to it?
The radical bit is nothing's off limits. So you just say whatever you like in that room. You know, and obviously you've got people like me there throwing, you know, but, you know, why should we have, you know, in America they've got the historically black colleges at
Oh yeah, the historic colleges, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So,
yeah.
you know, everyone's saying, oh yes, that's a good idea. And then somebody will say, I think it's a terrible idea and here's why. You know, so it's having those slightly more challenging conversations. I mean, my controversial take is I'm not sure how radical you can ever get within an institution like this. But, you know, it's a step towards...
But it might be good for people to actually have, you know, that space, be able to just sort of like... not experiment, to explore ideas, because it's so often you're not able to explore ideas. You get these sort of like parameters are set.
Absolutely.
They're set culturally, they're set
if you
by
want
a
the
group
money,
of people.
if you want, you have to write the bid in a
Yes.
particular way, or you have to write your cover letter in a particular way, or you have to learn how to write in this way. But what if we take a few steps back and like just explore, as you say, like who knows where that could go.
So how has the journey so far been in terms of kind of navigating that space, which, I mean, by hearing what both of you are saying, hasn't really been, it's like trying to put a round peg in a square peg in a round hole in a way, because the system is not really, for lack of a better term, the system is not really geared to accommodate our thought process or intellectual process.
Yeah.
Because actually going back to what you were saying about the, you know, kind of working within
the environment.
The environment you were working in prior to coming to this part of the world.
It's totally different.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And also having to suddenly find that we're having to reevaluate our standard of education, even though we know we are on the same level in terms of from an educational point of view. I remember us joking that the only place you can find a janitor who has a PhD is in Nigeria.
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So I would say as a people, our educational acumen is on the same par.
Yeah,
it's on the
actually.
same level.
If not higher, actually.
If not higher.
If not higher. And I say with our reservations, actually. You look at the statistics, you look at, you know, the results every year, you know, you see the people with distinctions, they're all black people most of the time, you know.
Yeah.
It's not because they're desperate. It's just because of the sense of the structure of things. You know, you're a black person, you're born in a black land, you know, the pressure to succeed.
That's it.
Like the sense of what success means, you know, that extra effort you want to put into life, you know, you come here, you know, a different country, different structure. By the time you put in just half a bit of that same, you know, attitude, that same approach to life, you're going to excel.
But it's an interesting one, that's because, I mean, Steph, you and I have a fairly similar sort of background, except my school was a bit more black and mine was in the 70s. But we're both born in Britain, sort of like raised in Britain as such there. And it's one of the things which I heard from my parents and all of that, you know, my parents are the Windrush generation, of you had to be twice as good. And increasingly, as I've got older, I've said to myself, that's an incredible burden and pressure. This exceptionalism you have to be. The only way you can succeed is to be exceptional. And, you know, I see myself as ordinary, average at best but, you know, averagely good at some things and averagely bad at some other things there. But to be exceptional is a really hard thing to be, and people get told that all the time, and you know, so sometimes you see people who succeed and you then start to think, well, they must be exceptional to succeed, when actually, you know, you can't be if you can't see it, sort of thing.
But my question has always been, by whose standard are we gauging our success? Because we seem to, especially for us as people of color in these spaces, we suddenly find that we hold ourselves to a level that sometimes it runs amok, especially when it comes to our well-being. We are harder on ourselves.
Absolutely. But Chuk said something at the beginning, though, which was that idea, which is that, you know, you can view, there you are, you're an academic, you're this, you're that, etc. there. But there's all those other people doing these different jobs and doing these different things, which is so important.
Absolutely.
And we saw that during, for instance, the COVID lockdown there. That, the bus drivers, the builders, the shop workers, all these people, you can't, key workers, where black people were in the front line, because that's where the high proportion of black people do those jobs there, with all of the pressure and not even the financial return and not even the social status which goes with it there. So for me, I think it's always important that we remember that. I mean, it's like when you go to a hospital often, and or to like a university, and I sort of think, well, the only time you ever see black people here, it was like, the cleaners, the kitchen assistants, etc., etc., etc.
I'm going to speak to that, actually. I'm going to speak to that because it's so interesting that you've sort of raised that up. And in all honesty, I'm going to correct an impression. It's not from a place of, saying that black people deserve, that particular level of job, right? In all honesty, because if you actually take all the time to meet some of those people you see, serving as gardeners, in quotes, serving as cleaners, that are black people. Some of them have a PhD.
Yeah, absolutely.
You would be shocked, actually. I was working, recently, and I saw some, lady, working as a cleaner. She was actually washing plates in, one of the facilities, and I just spoke to her, oh, you're Nigerian, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, how you doing? And she's all right. And I'm like, okay, so how did you come to, the UK? And she's like, I'm a pharmacist. And I'm like, ooh, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. I'm a pharmacist with 6-7 years working experience in my country, but I'm over here, right? So sometimes it's more than just, how much value you can give, right? It's also a function of what the environment you are has sort of structured in place to afford you, right? Because you can always only, do as much as you're allowed to, right? From different angles, looking at different, and, Steph was saying something about, feeling angry, without, in a subconscious manner. Honestly, when I moved to the UK, that's the way I felt, that's the exact way I felt, because, it's not, it wasn't like there was any direct, action at me or any direct, reaction at me, but just a sense of, this is your space, and you gotta live around it, right? You're a person of color.
That's where you are.
This is where you are, right? It just sort of got me really provoked, especially considering where I was coming from my home country, where I was regarded with so much, pride, excellence. I was regarded as someone who speaks and everyone listens, and I'm over this place, and it's not that same level of worth. It's not the same level of recognition, value, and I think that's one of the challenges that most black people, having to live in, Britain actually have to face. And it's, in all honesty, I must say that not a lot of people survive that.
That's true.
And when you say not survive it, what would you say are the sort of ways in which they don't survive it?
So, in all honesty, there's a sense of psychological health that every individual sort of possesses. You know it within yourself. And there's a position of trying to sort of get over the ceiling. Like the ceiling of the structure, of the, institutions of the country, of all of where the restrictions you have, the visa issues, all of the migration problems. And unless you're able to sort of emancipate yourself from those restrictions, you're never really complete psychologically.
No, but that's the thing, kind of going to your speaking to your point is, and I definitely understand what you are saying about the anger. I think for many of us, because I think as a people, we have always been empathetic. We have always worked within the structure of, sometimes we are put in spaces where you do because it's just a requirement of being. It's until at a later time when you kind of try and kind of backtrack and look at your own journey and some of the pressures that the journey has come up with.
Yes.
And when you break it down, that's when sometimes it's the understanding. Because for me, I mean, like yourself, I mean, I've always said, anger has always been my default.
But
for me,
anger can show in so many different ways, can't it? I mean, what was your way of, you're looking back as a teenager, a young person, how do you think anger was shown for you?
Oh, I was awful. I mean, as a woman, it was like psychological attack on anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
I didn't use my fist. My God, did I use my mouth?
I'm backing off now, Steph.
As a teenager, just an absolute nightmare. Just because I just had this anger, anything anybody said, I had the response to them, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't pretty.
But do you think it's really we talk about righteous anger, the anger for, I grew up in a Pan-African kind of environment where we look out for each other, and for me, when I see injustice anywhere pertaining to people who look like me, more so people who look like me, I am incensed. And then because I don't have the power behind that or to actually do something about that very thing, you feel this sense of powerlessness.
Well, Audre Lorde talks about translating that anger, that every woman's got a well-stocked arsenal of anger that she uses at strategic moments to change things. So I do think when it comes to fighting injustice, that anger is power. It needs to be coupled with love, and I think that is something I've come to later. Love for your community, love for your fellow human being. But I do think that anger it's a really powerful resource that often we're taught, get rid of it, suppress it.
But it can be a drive, can't it? It can be a drive. It keeps a positive drive there, and
it's an energy.
Absolutely.
Any other. And I think if used well, directed well, I think it's a really...
Yeah. We had David Busu from SACMA, we all know David, and a few weeks back, and I asked him a question which was, SACMA's been around for 40 years. Why do we still need SACMA? And he came back with a very, very quick retort. Well, back in the 80s, black men were 6 times more likely to be detained in a mental health institution than white men. Today, it's 5 times.
Yeah.
So that's your answer.
Yeah.
So that anger is, if you cannot be angry about that, there are all the things, and you use the expression there, Chuks, there about the psychological damage, which, many of us have experienced or have experienced. Just being here does that to you.
Yes, and I must admit, going back to what you were all saying, I think there is something about living within a capitalist society that expects us to produce all the time. So my years in Spain, I did so little of use.
Come on.
So when you were ringing home back to your dad, and his dad saying, "So what you doing?" Yes, I'm doing nothing.
Mum, Dad.
But I'm feeling good.
No, actually, without cutting you off, one of the things that I noticed about the places where we come from, especially in the African continent, and I've often said to people, I can spend the whole day without doing anything and feel like I accomplished everything.
Yes.
Because there is a harmony amongst the people.
It's amazing.
That even as much as you're saying you did little, but then the humanity of the space kind of gives you that sense of value.
Money can buy. Money can buy.
Yeah. And I'm sure Spain has that kind of vibe where you feel like, I didn't do jack, but
but and it leads you on to other things. Like,
exactly.
Why is there this push for a 4-day week?
Exactly.
And they've done experiments, and they're just as productive, I think, are the results of these studies, because you need that downtime. I get most of my best ideas. I think
come when you rest.
When I'm playing with the kids, or when I'm going for a walk, or when I'm running, or when I'm washing the dishes. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I find that interesting, that notion about doing nothing or doing other things other than just the productive side of things there. I mean, I've just been up in Scotland, up in the Highlands, and I had a great time. Did nothing. The biggest thing I did was to walk for 3 hours. But what got me there was that it's not a place I would go to live, because it's nearly as if I can't live there because actually I'd be on my own as a person of colour there. So actually, that gets me angry. The idea that actually living in Britain as a black person, there are, again, back to these limits or these parameters, these sort of like walls put on you. I can't go there, I can't do this. And that's something which, you know, when you're trying to look for the things which help you manage the hard things in life, where I can have a couple of weeks there, where I can pop into the countryside, or I can do these other things there, there's still that limit. You know, that, to my mind, is damaging for people. You know, it has to be, in the sense that there's a limit to what you can do, a limit to where you can be, a limit to what you could be.
But that's it. That's the thing. It's I was recently asked in another forum about, you know, spaces and places, especially here in the UK, and did I ever, and you know, everybody has spoken about, you know, well, I always felt welcome in this place and blah blah blah.
Really?
You know, the usual.
Oh wow.
But then,
There's a shaking of heads here.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, wait. But this is the thing. It's like everyone has spoken. But then when it came to me, I said, for me, it never really was an issue that there were places that were close to me. Because when I came to this part of the world, I viewed myself as I would say, like a cultural ambassador. I was an artist. I was an actor. The first time I came here, I was in a film. So I came here to do work. So when I came, I was running workshops in schools and teaching. I was in education. So for me, no place was out of limits, simply. But then that was a mental shift.
Yes.
When we walk with the fully understanding that a lot of institutions are close to us, but I understood that if I don't try and break that door, my children will have to deal with it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like going back to the to you, both of you as educators, actually Dawn included, is the fact that you have tasted what the what the other place is like. At least it could be a sour taste, but you have tasted some about that place. My question is, how do we open those environments to accommodate more people who look like us? What nuggets do you have that can at least add to their arsenal of survival in a hostile environment, if I can put it that way?
I do think these solidarity spaces are important. I think that helps the survival. For me, at least, I found, you know, the mentoring scheme and the different groups provide opportunities just to get together. You can call it whatever label you want, whether it's mentoring or a group. It's just that opportunity to get together. But at the same time, again, living within this capitalistic society, you need to create financial opportunities, job opportunities for those people coming up. I think in the university, they're very good at having black and brown PhD students and taking their money and getting PhD students on their CV and ticking that off. But they're not very good at hiring us and keeping us, retaining us. Either they don't hire us or the environment's quite hostile. And so we end up going somewhere else. So I think those are two really important things: solidarity spaces and also creating jobs.
So what do those spaces look like? For me, who is the least educated of us here, in the sense that my master's is a simple artistic master's.
don't no.
What is
I'm not having that. I'm not having that.
That was basically for Donald. No, but with all seriousness, because some of us, we don't recognize those spaces. Because one of the things, actually, when I met Chuks for the first time, I think we chopped it up a little bit. But I saw a guy who was very comfortable in himself. You know what I'm saying? He's comfortable. He owns the spaces in which he works in. Maybe it's because of he's 7 foot tall. You know what I'm saying?
No. It's just you about 5 foot 4. His average height.
That sounds fine.
It's a safe space.
I'm 6'2", though. I'm 6'2", close to 7. You know.
So how do we navigate that space, though?
I think one more and then I promise to pass the mic. But I think we can't let our values become co-opted.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I recently said, I'm going part-time. And everyone said, no. I mean, they didn't say it in these words, but it's no, you need to earn more money for the university. You need to write more bids. You need to write more papers. You know, you need to stay valuable to us. I'm like, no, I'm valuable to myself and to my family and to my friends. And I need my mental health. And I can't do that working full-time for an institution that I feel doesn't value, that our values aren't aligned. So I think having clear what your values are, who you work for. Do you work for the community or do you work for the university? You know, I think that's also really important, and that comes from those solidarity spaces.
Yeah.
You find your answers in these rooms,
Right.
not in those rooms out there.
In all honesty, like looking at the spaces, I think it's very important because sometimes it's more than just, you know, the environment that you find yourself in. You just want to see someone that looks like you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. You just want to see someone that probably thinks like you, probably feels the exact same way you feel. Right. I was speaking to someone at work some days ago. She's Black, and then she's like, oh, and I'm like, she's like, I know. And I'm like, we know. And, you know, like we both were speaking to each other without saying words, you know. Right. And it felt so comfortable, you know. I just felt so comfortable, you know, being able to express, you know. But from an individualistic point of view, right, I believe that the spaces that we need, you know, and what the spaces should do for us is to remind us of our individual sense of who we are as people of color.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going to say that because, you know, when I moved to the UK, I was swimming in searching for who I was.
Yeah.
Right. For a complete 6 months. I was, you know, trying to apply for literally everything, trying to get a university to get me about something. And, you know, you just, no. And no. And no. You're so good, but no. Whoa, fantastic CV. No.
Yeah.
You know, and you apply, and then, you know, you just suddenly begin to believe that maybe I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I don't have so much experience. And that was the case for myself, you know. Imagine making over 10, 20, 30 applications and everything just go no. And I'm like, whoa, I look at my CV. Yeah. Like, I've worked in over 11 companies.
Yes.
Not just randomly, like awards, you know, like I'm not useless.
Yeah.
You know, but the structure, the society has sort of conferred on you a sense of your worth.
Yeah.
Right. And as a person of color, I think you have to get to that point. And that's what the safe spaces should do for us. It should bring us to that point where we are able to identify our individual sense of value.
That's it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Until you do that, you're not leaving, really.
Yeah, I completely take what you say. I mean, I know in my own experience of being a deputy principal that the best or the time I felt most comfortable at work was when there was a team of 4 senior leadership team and 2 of us were black. It was another black woman, and the sixth form then must have had about 10, 12 black people working there alongside some Asian people as well. And what was important for me was that they were at different levels and they were very different people. But we all had a common thing. We were all working as black people in a predominantly white institution. So there was that sort of like, sort of thing there. But we were all individuals.
Right.
And that's what got me as well, that even though we were very different people, that there was this recognition, there was a comfort at some times. So I know occasionally colleagues would comfort me And they would comfort me in recognising, Donald, you're in that position where it's not just a case of it's this manager just doing that. There's something else as well.
Yeah.
Right.
There as well, which you often get as well. You don't know what it is, but you just have a sense there's a little bit more to this than just simply your position.
Yeah.
Right.
And that can wear you down.
It
and it's
can.
this. And there's a great book out it's actually by an American Jewish woman called Weathering.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if you've read it, but it's a great book there, which she basically says that a group of people, African Americans, regardless of socioeconomic status, that they are more likely to have illnesses and diseases of morbidity and die younger regardless of socioeconomic.
Yeah.
So even those who end up as professors and as doctors and as lawyers and as accountants, the jobs you wanted to do, and even if they rise to the top, they're likely to go earlier.
Yes.
So Steph, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and there's definitely truth in that. I mean, from my experience, but my fascination with you as a young lady, as a sister, as a woman, how? Because there are certain struggles we deal with as men and as black men, which sometimes we, in our naivety or in our inability to sort of kind of feel what you are dealing with. How do you navigate that space of the spaces that don't love us and still maintain a sense of self?
Well, I think for me, I'm quite good at compartmentalizing. So again, it goes back to this idea of knowing my own value and knowing my own worth, and not kind of dancing to your tune, whoever you are, So I think that's always been quite important, but that's quite an individual thing. But I don't know, I feel like as women, I can't speak for all of us, but I do feel like we're quite good at setting up the social supportive networks that we need to. I feel like we pour into those networks, but we also get a lot out of them.
There's a question I asked. I've asked my wife this thing. I mean, my wife works for the university also, but she's a librarian, but her master's is in music. She's a composer. I have more than once asked her, "Are you happy?"
You need to ask her, "Are you happy with you?"
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to go there, because if you ask the question, you've got...
No, that's true. That's very true. But for me, it's always been this idea that if we can't find happy in our spaces, how then do we wake up in the morning and feel a sense of let's do something? Because for me, if I'm not happy, I'll probably curl up in bed and not wake up until I'm ready.
I mean, that's a big question, but again, it goes to that anger, and it goes back to not always having to do something. If you need time to curl up in bed, then do that. Hopefully you bounce back, and then the next day or the next week you're feeling better, and you're ready to kind of use that, either that rest or that recuperation or whatever your body was telling you needed, to put it to good use.
Right. I think for myself, it's a difficult one, actually. When you ask the question, it actually struck a chord, because, I ask myself a lot of times, are you happy? Are you happy where you are? Right. And happiness is a very abstract thing, because when you look at it, sometimes you look at it in context of, what's happening right now. Sometimes you look at it in context of a lot of things happening within a period of time, right? But I think what I would say to, being in a place of being happy and being productive, especially within, this environment we find ourselves in, is that, I think you need to get to the point where you understand why you're not happy.
That's it.
Right. I think that's the most important thing, to do. Because if you understand that you're not happy because of the structure around you, the environment around you, you can emancipate yourself from that feeling of unhappiness. and direct it to the fact that the structure is what it is, but you can live your life with a sense of happiness in your own self. And for me, that's just been the way I've been able to navigate it. So, when I go to work, when I find myself in spaces where there's the undertone of right, I'm not looking at that undertone. I recognize it. I don't get surprised by it. I don't get I see it, but I exist within my own value space.
Yeah.
And I'm taking on my next task not for the purpose of seeking validation from this, but for myself to perpetuate my value. Yeah. Right. So from the next thing I do, it's for my value. Right. Yes, so if I take the next task, it's for my value. Right. You can choose to see it. You can choose not to see it. But it's for my value. And the amazing thing, no matter how rigid the system is, if you keep pushing yourself from a place of value, everyone's going to look at some point.
That's so true.
Yeah. And I think you're really right there, because I think that, first of all, the notion of happiness and work, I don't really sort of see it like that. I do see it like you say, which is value, which I think gives you purpose. Because if you know your values, or you've got a sense of what your values are, and that actually is the thing which is actually driving you. I watched a Japanese film recently called Perfect Days, and he's a toilet cleaner, and he's working with this young man who says, "Why do you clean this toilet and do it so thoroughly, etc., etc.?" And he basically says to him, "Because it's my job." And he has a value in what he does.
Exactly.
If I'm going to do this job, I'm going to do it the best I can do it.
Exactly.
And he got real inner satisfaction from doing that.
Right.
And my experiences of work is that lots of times I was not happy, but and the times when I really struggled was when I felt as if my values were being tested.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's when I was at my most, that's what kept me awake at night. That's when I thought to myself, I'm selling myself short here. I'm not showing any strength. I'm not being courageous. I'm not being all the things I want to be. That's when I really felt sort of less than. And then that's when I'll go back to what I said to you about having a colleague who was black, who in the senior leadership team. Then in those circumstances, I could share with her my values, and that gave me strength.
Exactly.
And that gave me strength to be with my colleagues in this senior leadership team, who was, the boss was a white woman and it was a white male, that actually I was being heard.
Yes.
Right.
And I was being heard well.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't feel that later on when I had new boss or whatever, and I'm not trying to sort of disparage this person, but I did at that point then, that even when I was being tested, I had some support.
Yeah, that solidarity.
So that's the amazing thing, speaking about what Steph was actually trying to sort of create, so those spaces that she has sort of spoken about, right, that seem to support people of color, right, they serve as a sense of validation of the value that you individually recognize within yourself. So when you find yourself within those spaces, they sort of make your value sort of known to you. Oh, come on, you're so good, you're doing so well, we support you, we understand what it means, but until you find those spaces, you still have to be able to hold on to the value that is you.
This is one of the most, Steph said something in a recent event that she put on at Sadaka. She said, speaking of the space, the conference or the get together where we were, she says, this is not verbatim. I wish I had that brain that remembers everything. I'm old. But she said this is a place where we can be together and conspire.
Exactly.
That's the term that I like,
exactly,
that the way we can be together and conspire.
Right.
Conspiracy doesn't have to be some nefarious thing,
Right.
where we are in the basement with metal heads and
Right.
You sound very Guy Fawkes.
with metal heads and you know what I'm saying. It can be a good space.
Exactly.
But kind of going back again to that place of support. As individuals, how have you had to articulate your value system in those spaces so that you have other people who resonate with what it is that you stand for?
So I'll be quite honest with you. I've really struggled because part of the reason why I've had to create these groups and networks and things like that is because there are so few of us in academia.
Right.
Like, you're saying you got that colleague and you had that moment. I was like, I want that. And you're talking about how you had like different levels.
I only had it for a short period in 40 years. I had it for
okay.
about 8 years.
Yeah.
And when she took early retirement, I knew I was going to be quite soon after her as well,
Yes.
because
once you've had a taste of it as well. and how
yeah,
well
you
it
do.
can
How well
work,
it,
I
and how it
imagine.
makes you feel.
Yes, yeah.
It didn't take away the many, many, many difficult situations which you find yourself in, but it made managing, handling those difficult situations. You felt a little bit more sort of reassured about it.
Yes.
Yeah, because you can't take away difficulty. Difficulty exists all the time.
Yes.
Right.
That's just a given there. It's how you are able to manage it, the resilience you've got with it as well. So you've not got things eating away at you, which actually take away some of your confidence, takes away some of your sort of faith in yourself.
Yes.
I think. Because I think those are things which actually, in the workplace, they can wear you down.
Yes.
So that actually, you are carrying with you a load.
Yes.
Right.
It is
Which
energy. Yeah.
is energy sapping,
Yeah.
which can make you feel bitter, can make you feel all sorts of things, which are not good things to have.
Right.
And you would you rather not have it. I mean, I always think back to my dad and my mum and dad, but I'm going to talk about my dad in particular. He comes there, like yourself there. He comes from the Caribbean in the 50s. He's not educated at all, but he gets a job and he works hard. And he's treated like a boy. That's how he was treated. All that generation, they were treated like they were boys. They could literally call them boy.
But they did.
They did. And it was just like that. So when he came home from work from a steel foundry, after being treated like that Monday to Friday for years on years, you could... His frustration and anger would come out.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
It would come out.
Yes.
Where else can it go?
Yes.
And that is bad for that unit there, or raising children, those intimate relationships which need to be forged, etc. They're being forged in this crucible of bitterness and frustration and anger. That isn't a good thing at all.
Yes.
Right. So there's something I was going to talk about, right? And that's the fact that it was something I sort of had to sort of discover myself, after spending some time in the UK. And it felt like I had picked up a lot of, negative energy, right, all around me. And one day I just realized that I could do something called cleansing, right? Listening to you speak about, spending Monday to Friday, being treated like a boy, I got to a point where I said, I have to intentionally cleanse myself of whatever negative energy I've received, from school, from work, from people around me, from the bus driver. I remember one day I was getting into a bus, and I was like gonna pay for the ticket, and the guy said he's not gonna pick me up. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? I said, no, step down from the bus. And I'm like, you don't know who I am, right? Yeah. Because I'm not stepping down. And it's like, he's not gonna move until I step down.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And I sat down on the ground of the bus. And I'm like, okay, let's chill. Right? And it was a horrible scene because we were there for like almost 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Step down, no step down. I'm like, why are you talking to me? And he's like, it's not going my way. I said, you know my way. You don't know my way. I know my way. And I stepped into the bus. I'm paying for the bus. You should drive me. Right? And, I got back home and I was just like, oh, damn shit.
Yeah.
Right? In Nigeria, I have a driver.
Yes. Yeah.
That drives me. I have a driver in Nigeria, like that drives me wherever I want to go. I don't use the buses, and I'm being asked to step down from a bus, right? And I just realized that if you don't spend time to intentionally cleanse yourself of some of the negative energy that come with you being a person of color within this space, you take that along with you.
That's it.
I do wonder though, as I said, I'm half and half, like Nigerian and St. Vincent. I do wonder whether, because you grew up in Nigeria in a very privileged way, whether it's easier for you to cleanse than somebody who has, perhaps got generations of trauma that's embedded.
Right.
It's harder to cleanse that. It's like,
to be honest,
it's in your bones. It's written in your bones.
To be honest,
and I've seen it on the different sides of my family. Both sides have issues, like every family. But the side from the Caribbean, like you can see things.
Right.
That is.
It's
that
difficult.
anger that Donald was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking there, one of the things, yourself there, in your background there, it's as if there's an inner confidence.
Yes.
Right.
A confidence which basically says, as you just said there, do you know my background? To what I'm used to, whatever there.
Yes.
I'm not, and Caribbeans, when you came here, had to do so much fighting. So much breaking the walls down, etc., etc., etc. But I think there was something different from how you described things there. I'm not used to this, but it's interesting. As you were talking, I'm thinking, so how do some people who don't have your personal resolve manage a situation like that, where they've been used to something back home, they come here and they're getting these doors closed, and they've got this background, got all the qualifications, they've got all the professional experiences, and the doors are being closed on them all of the time. How do they manage it if they haven't got that sort of personal resolve? And I hadn't really thought of it like that, because I've often thought about it from obviously my own experience, but actually that must be really hard for some people.
Right. Definitely, it's ridiculously hard for people, really, and I'm not gonna lie to you. And that's why, those spaces are important, right? Because the purpose of some of those spaces is to remind us of who we are, really. I don't know what, I don't like to look at success, actually. I don't like to look at success in terms of what people define it as, because when I think about myself, I think I've succeeded in a lot of places. But most times when I wake up, I don't think of it as anything. I just think of it as me just living my life out, just the way it's been. But I think that any person of color that exists within, this society is a successful person.
Just to be.
Just to be.
Yes.
Just
honestly.
to survive,
And I'm going to be honest with you, because to survive, to exist in this society as a person of color, it means you're really, really successful. It means you're a hardworking person. It means that you're willing to survive. Right? Because it's not. It's welcoming, it's welcoming. It's welcoming. It is. It's such a welcoming society, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that being able, no matter at what point in your journey you're in, as a black person, or as a person of color, whatever the case may be, no matter what point in your journey you're in, the moment you choose to intentionally remind yourself that me being in this place makes me a successful person, sort of puts you to the start of, understanding and building on your value. And I'm going to be honest with you, value is not something that, I know it's very easy for you to think that because value is born from a place of privilege. Yes, sometimes it's sort of conferred on you by, the experiences you've had, but value is something you consistently build.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I say it from a place of understanding, because I can tell you for sure, as it's 4 months ago, I didn't see myself as much of a value as I see myself right now. And all of the building of that value has come from something intentional. I've had to put myself through that intentional process of understanding, realizing, appreciating what I bring to the table. Which, as a person of color, trust me, you bring a lot.
No, you do. You do.
Yeah.
Even as a barber.
Yes.
Even as a barber.
With the barber, they value the barbers. We've talked about this a lot. When I was a child,
Right.
I remember going to a barber's when in Nottingham there must have been only 3,000 black people in Nottingham, and we were all in one area. So that barber shop, Brown's Barber Shop, was the place, you know, where you had, you know, your dad would leave you there, cut your hair, get your hair cut, etc. You was just left. But they had this photograph of Muhammad Ali standing above Sonny Liston on the canvas. And, you know, so Muhammad Ali was like, it was everything for us. But that barbershop was absolutely a linchpin. You know, that's when you could see your dad as a man. You could see these other black men there in their pride and pomp and all the other bits. That
reminds you of who you are.
And they were joyful. They were funny. The storytelling. You know, the storytelling is just something else, wasn't it? Just talk and talk and talk. But you know, you said there about survival. I mean, survival sounds a really sort of like, no, that's not very high bar, but I think we often talk about, say, for instance, they call it the Caribbean community in Britain, and be quite negative and sort of, I think, nearly do ourselves down. And I think sometimes we need to find a way in which we can say, actually, look at us and look at all the things we are, and all the great things we are, all the great things we do, all what we've contributed, and it's only been lately with the sort of like slightly co-opting the Windrush sort of thing there, but actually a pride is being stated more. You know, where we're flag waving, saying we are here, we've been here for so long, and we've done this and that. You know, a society which was literally colourless. Food was colourless. The way people mood was colourless. The music was colourless. We have injected something into this society which it gives it an energy.
And a joy. I agree.
And I think for me, actually, it's like I'm beelining for you all. No, for me, I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated. Even growing up, you know, I grew up, my teachers were from the Caribbean, even though I grew up in Zimbabwe. But speaking to what you were saying about the being partly Nigerian and partly, you know, from the Caribbean, St. Vincent, you say. For me, I'm fascinated by the combination, because you had people. It's like the fighters from the Caribbean, because you know, to actually kind of get your, you know, like there's a lot of people who had to fight for their survival in the Caribbean, and you have the land of kings. You know, every Nigerian I know, for me, exudes that sense of kingship.
They say we're arrogant, but it's not arrogant. We just know who we are.
Well, 1 in 4 people of African descent in the world, they are Nigerian.
Wow.
1 in 4. That's including the 80 million people of African descent in Brazil. It's that 1 in 4. 1 in 4 is an incredible number, isn't it? So no wonder Nigerians can just say, you know, if you're thinking of African descent, think Nigerian.
It's really interesting, actually. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. And I'm just taking from what you said. You said something about, you know, the word survival, right? I know sometimes we sort of look at it from a connotative meaning. You know, what does it mean? But if you really try to understand survival as a word, as a complex word, it depicts winning. Really, in all honesty. You know, it depicts winning, and it depicts winning from a state that intends to sort of
destroy,
sort of compress you down. Right. So I honestly, I don't view it as a place of defeat.
Yes.
And I say it because, you know, whether we choose to accept it or not, survival is the place that most people of color find themselves in Britain. You can do a sample.
Is it?
They find themselves in a place of survival, and I speak about it, understanding and reminding them that, you know, in that place where you don't necessarily feel your best, right? You've won, really. You've won. You're in a place of winning, and honestly, it never gets better. There's always the next, win to be won, the win to be won. And this podcast in itself is a win for Black people.
Yeah.
Right? Being able to be in a room and, be able to say the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
And to conspire.
And so many people keep coming to me saying, conspire.
Conspire.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
We have to finish.
Yeah, before we finish, to finish off, I was thinking, what next for both of you? I've been saying, is there a book in Donald's life? I'm not so sure if the allotment can allow him to write a book, but in your cases, I know you have a lot of publications, because I was looking through your stuff and thinking,
but
there's so
very
many
little on race.
Yeah.
Very little on race. It's something I struggle to articulate. So maybe that's the next step. But I feel like, I don't know. For me, it doesn't. Sorry, I know we finished. I feel it jars a little bit. Academic publications and race. It feels like, who am I talking to? Who needs to know this information?
Yeah.
Is it the academics that I want to talk to, or is it holding nice events where we can conspire, or coming on nice podcasts like this to talk about? So I don't know what the next step is, but survival sounds good.
Right. So I think for me, trying to understand, my own journey has been trying to sort of understand what phase I'm in. Right. And, in a system and a society as complex as, this one, you have to be able to penetrate the nucleus to be able to, proliferate, like enlarge, right? So I'm in the place where I have penetrated the nucleus. For me, it's just about proliferating now, right? And for me, what that means for, the next person of color next to me is that I'm going to remind you of who you are, right? I found myself doing that, to the pharmacist I spoke about, reminded her that, you're doing this job, but, you're worth more than this, right? Because her whole mindset was that, this is the best I'm going to get, it doesn't get better than this, the system. And I'm like, yeah, the system is what it is, but what's your value?
Yes.
Like, what's all that 7 years you put into studying pharmacy, all that chemicals you've studied, you've written exams about, you've, deserved the degree, Think about it. So that's what I do for most people of, color that I meet. I remind them of who they are. And I sort of give them a sense of, I like the candle of, self-reasoning within them, which is the role that we all play. And it's easier to do that when you can sort of signpost to your own journey. Yes. And say, this is where I am, and, it gets better, really.
Yep. Can I ask a final one, which is basically, you and I were talking about this, which is, what's the, call it like the one thing, or the thing which is, you take away and you say, when I'm not having the best, this is what I need to do. Your one thing. Mine is walking. Actually, two things. Walking in my allotment. What's your thing?
What's your thing?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I'm still thinking.
Right. So one thing, not in the beat to sound religious, actually, and that's praying, actually, for me. It is praying, actually. It's funny because I'm not so much of a religious person, but I think I find my best days when I pray, Right. I think the other thing would be cooking, right?
Oh, yes.
I really cook a lot.
Welcome.
I really cook a lot, actually, and it's interesting to have to explore. A story for another day, but this is one of the things that gets me really crazy about this place.
So are we thinking of a cookbook in the long run? Or
Definitely. I just recently started thinking about maybe it's time to have my YouTube.
Right. No, bro. If that happens,
because honesty, you said something, while you're speaking, that there's a whole lot of the person of color being to show, the way, to bring spice to what exists. And honestly, I think there's a whole lot to be taught.
Yes, that's true.
About food.
I've been trying to kind of figure out your love, man. I'm struggling.
Well, I've had that debate with people, jollof or rice and peas. But no Nigerian was ever going to accept rice and peas.
Don't make me pick a side.
No.
Thank you. I mean, we're going back to your thing. What is your thing?
To be honest, I really don't know. I mean, so I've got 3 young children at home. So if I can find a moment's peace, like literally 1 minute to reflect by myself without little people chasing me around, that helps to kind of recenter myself for the next thing.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time, and we look forward to the books. Generally,
YouTube channel,
and YouTube channel.
Don't worry, all of it will be
definitely. I'm because this is the thing. We don't, as much as we have publications and stuff, and I think it's about time we wrote more. I know there's a lot of people who are writing, but I think once we put it down, and then the next generation can read and stuff. Even Donald, even though Donald, I mean, I'm sure you're still resisting.
I'm interested in the food book now. and the food channel, because food here before black people came. I mean, not seasoning your food. I mean, what is that about?
Maybe that's a conversation. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Until next time, keep those conversations going and the clippers buzzing.